You may begin your webcast.
Good afternoon. My name is Diane Heath, and I'm the Executive Director of the British Columbia Association of Social Workers. I have the honor of welcoming you all to today's webcast that's a collaboration between BC ASW and the Canadian Association of Social Workers in celebration of National Social Work Month. For today's webcast, we have over 450 registrants connecting from every part of Canada to learn about the full circle experience of ending client relationships. Today, we are extremely fortunate to have Mary Leslie, an active member of BC ASW, as well as our representative to the CASW Private Practice Committee. Mary's social work career spans over 30 years, primarily in healthcare and private clinical practice. Mary has had a private social work practice for 15 years, currently in North Vancouver and Burnaby, and has consulted for nurses, physicians, social workers, and counselors. We're very fortunate to have her here today to learn from her experience and expertise. In terms of process for this webinar, the first half of the webinar, approximately 30 minutes, will be a presentation by Mary, followed by a half-hour question period that I will moderate. During the presentation, you can type in and send in your questions at any time, and I will begin to ask them at the end of the presentation. Now, without further wait, it's my pleasure and honor to welcome Mary Leslie. Mary?
Thanks, Diane, and I also want to offer a warm welcome to each of you from rainy British Columbia. Even after over 30 years of experience in social work, with all of the endings that has entailed, I still feel there is always more I can learn about getting endings right. Just as each of our clients is unique, so are their endings. This area has been of considerable interest to me for some time, but was certainly helped by my crash course in endings in 2006, when I set out for South Africa for a 6-week volunteer opportunity and had to close or transition over 40 clients in a fairly short period of time. That provided a steep learning curve. It was then that I discovered the ending letter, which I will discuss later in our time today. I will let each of you just glance through the goals of the presentation. The ingredients of a good ending sound a little like motherhood, but are important, I feel. Clients feel they've been well supported. The ending enhances earlier gains made. The client feels more aware of their own contribution and wisdom from your time together. Client departs with an enhanced sense of self. These goals are prominent right from the first moment with clients or patients. I am a strong promoter of clients being encouraged to take as much ownership of our sessions as possible. I can't stress enough the importance of our own self-reflection in endings especially. Take a moment to touch into your own experience of a positive ending here as recipient or care provider. I will try to touch on each of these areas at least briefly. Many of my comments can be generalized to endings with individuals, groups, couples, and families. Some dynamics are different, but there are similarities also. I will primarily be addressing working with individuals today, given our time constraints. There we go. So with one session only, until I started working as a social worker in a downtown hospital in Vancouver, St. Paul, I had the assumption that focusing on endings was for longer-term situations. However, I soon learned that some contacts in this area could be very impactful and intense, and that a conscious ending process was not just desirable, but professionally responsible practice. I recall sessions with women who came to the emergency after an assault, struggling with whether to charge their partner. There were situations that involved sudden death, and with families who showed up often at night, admitting they could no longer care for their loved one, to name a few life-altering decisions, to say the least. The process encouraged patients and their family members brought to these situations needed to be noted, honored, and framed in an important way, and required a purposeful ending. In those situations, despite the pressures we worked under in the ER, the moments taken here to acknowledge the impacts for patients, for my own impacts, and sometimes the impacts for other emergency staff were vitally important. So moving to set numbers of sessions. At first glance, set numbers of sessions may seem to be the smoother ending scenarios, as contact with clients is set out right from the start and can be clear for both of us with our time together. Nevertheless, clients and providers, even after 4 to 8 sessions, can develop attachments that require care and attention. Anger that the employee assistance program or insurance company would not extend further sessions can arise. Providers may feel pressure to see clients pro bono or for much reduced private practice fees, if the EAP allows that, resulting in tension for both the client and provider, and requiring careful handling of boundary and ending issues. Individually contracted with no ending set. Ideally, the client will indicate when it's time to end sessions, and in many respects, those are the clearer endings. Although in reviewing the literature, I was surprised to read of social workers who struggle with client-initiated endings, with feelings of abandonment or significant loss. I feel supervision is especially vital here, as well as in most potentially challenging endings. All endings can be challenging for children and teens and often require special care and attention. Transfers to another service provider or counselor or social worker. I will address this aspect a little later in our time. Unexpected endings can be more challenging, the most challenging of the situations we will encounter. We could spend the whole hour and more on this topic. With client-initiated, we walk a fine line. Encouraging clients to speak to their reasons for leaving could help them with a greater sense of empowerment. However, we also need to protect them from our need to feel helpful and successful. So honoring their right to leave with no explanation can be important also in some situations. I sometimes thank clients for letting me know they're leaving and add, you are not required to give a reason, but if down the road you wish to share feedback about your decision, that would always be welcome. I wish you well. Care provider initiated or agency imposed. Guilt or a sense of responsibility in care providers can arise here. In my decision to leave my private practice for 6 weeks, I gave clients 2 months warning with an offer to support them to find and get established with another care provider or an interim plan if they needed support while I was away. I'll talk about this a bit more later. It is not uncommon for clients to look for the bad guy in imposed endings. It could be the care provider, the agency, the management, etc. But it is important that we redirect the client to how hard endings can be and stay free of the blaming as we honor their sense of loss and grief. This can be some of the most important work we do with clients. It may be more helpful to name it as a time of transition, focusing on what they will take with them as a result of the gains they've made, and looking ahead at how they can continue to work in other ways. In the articles I've covered, there was a general lament at how little attention this topic has been given, not only in social work literature, there's much more in psychology, but also in social work education. For those of you who supervise students in field placements or practicums, one strong recommendation I encountered is the importance of students being very well prepared for the multitude of emotions and feelings of deep responsibility and guilt they can have around ending. Often their practicum format essentially determines the length of the session rather than the client's needs. There can be multiple layers of ending emotions here. The students are leaving the client, the agency, and their supervisors, and in their final year, their school experience, on top of the losses being experienced by clients and often their supervisors. These need lots of attention and support, as well as self-reflection for sure. For those of you supervising practicum students or the students themselves, I recommend reading Kathy Siebold's article cited in the references. Death or illness of a client or care provider. For those of you in private practice, it is vital you have a succession plan with another registered social worker or registered psychologist with whom you appoint as your professional executor in the event of your death or sudden illness. That person needs to know your password, how to find your keys to your records, where all your records, back ones as well, are kept, what you would want your clients to know, and the list of care providers your clients might be referred to. Very seldom when a client has an unexpected death do I feel that I can communicate with their family. Occasionally the family is the one to let me know, but more often I have seen it in a newspaper or heard word of mouth. It is important you do an intentional debrief around these times. Expected deaths also warrant intentional endings where possible. The most challenging of these for me have been with mothers who were dying and could not provide any closure with or for their children due to their own intense grief, with huge impacts for children often after their death. What is meant by a holistic perspective? I try to stay focused right from the beginning of contact on the client's positive resources and to begin naming them as I see them as early as in the session as possible. I give clients a chance to ask questions about me or how I work, and I also ask if this is their first counseling session. And if it is not their first, would they like to share briefly what worked well for them previously or less well? This broader picture is very important in an assessment. I try to keep it very brief, but it often is an indicator of possible potholes we might encounter down the road. I also contract with the client to let me know if and as any previous negative feelings or experiences that they've named should start to come up for them in our sessions. This is crucial information as we prepare for the ending phase. With couples who have had previous counseling, their respective views of past sessions will often be quite different. This is valuable information and provides another note to self to keep checking in about how we are doing in meeting each of their needs as we progress. Use of metaphors to bookend sessions and provide structure. My next step is to invite clients to think of a picture or metaphor of where they are at this time, at this moment in their whole life. I like to keep out of the rehearsed story mode as long as possible with a client. Some clients find this easy and others not so. I let them know this is an invitation only and not a requirement. And in 80% of my sessions with those who can't initially come up with their metaphor, about 10 minutes into the session, they'll pop up with their picture. I write their picture comments in great detail, and they're in my head for the entire time I'm working with them. This is vitally important for not only staying on track, but for goal setting in a more right brain way, which is the cornerstone for me in maintaining a holistic perspective. It also sets a forward direction right from the get-go. Once we have their picture, and even if we don't, I ask what would need to happen that they have control over for them to feel our time together was worthwhile. It is amazing how concrete they can be here. The words that you have control over can help them stay out of victim mode. We have our contract established, hopefully in the first 8 to 10 minutes. If there are unrealistic expectations that I sense of myself or themselves, I try to address this right away. So often clients by the end have only a vague sense of how they were when they first walked through my door. The metaphor can bring the beginning moment more vividly back and helps them see more clearly how they've changed. Clients often will present their own ideas for endings. We listen carefully and have prepared them to take a lead here. Stephen Kramer, in Positive Endings, tells clients in their first session that he will wait for the client to tell him when they are ready to end their session. In this way, the tone is set for collaboration and an open dialogue that anticipates the ending process right in the first few minutes. I try to do a picture touch-up periodically, often implicitly, if not explicitly, at the end of each session, as well as the end of all sessions. I will address the power of metaphors a bit more shortly. I take nothing for granted. My primary working model is the Satir model, crafted by Virginia Satir, a social worker whose model is still evolving almost 100 years since her birth, through her students and those who continue to teach her principles. Virginia used the metaphor of an iceberg as a tool for both assessment and intervention, implicitly and explicitly with clients. It is a constant reminder to me that what we see in clients' behavior, especially initially, is only 10%, with all the rest being below the waterline. It is our task to do some deep sea diving with them and keep a constant reminder that what is underneath the surface and less visible is also very important. I often focus on the elements of their positive iceberg, and by that I mean or include their behavior, their coping style, their feelings about feelings, beliefs, assumptions, expectations, and yearnings when they are feeling at their best and most whole. Then we look at this aspect of their iceberg that represents the more challenging parts of themselves. Keeping the positive slide in view provides a tailwind, as it were, that helps empower the harder parts of change. Sorry, I jumped ahead to this slide a little early. In the beginning is the ending. A quick review of what I was just addressing. Regarding the purposeful ending for each session, that may be done explicitly with the client by asking how they're feeling or what they are taking away. In a sense, you are helping them anchor any changes or insights from the session. You could ask how things will be different for these changes. They may or may not return, so this, in hindsight, may have more significance later than at first sight. Revisiting their metaphor may be included here also. I want to refer to Aaron Kramer of Positive Endings, as he brings a really interesting perspective to this topic. He's a psychologist, but also has social work membership in the American Association of Social Workers and has also taught psychiatrists. So he really covers this perspective from a broad perspective. And I quote, "Negative therapeutic endings almost always originate in the beginning and middle phases of treatment. They do not suddenly occur as the relationship is coming to a close. These stages do not proceed in a linear progression, but are like a spiral inextricably connected. End of quote. He sees the negative endings as stemming largely from poor contracting, role clarification, and/or relationship formation early on in the session. He also addresses the role that money can play in therapeutic context. That is a larger topic than we can cover today, but I will direct you to his writing if that is a challenge for you. Impacts of providers' own endings. We touched on words earlier that reflect positive experiences of your own personal or professional endings, and now I'm asking you to dig a little deeper. Our relationship with ourselves is vitally important in how we can support others. Endings have the power, like grief and mourning, to raise powerful and sometimes unexpected emotions for not only our clients, but also for us. In the literature of surveys done with clients about what was most effective aspect of their counseling, the relationship always outweighs the particular methods that care providers use as part of the change and growth process. Bringing our ending emotions, strengths, and weaknesses to a more conscious level has the potential to pay big dividends for you and your clients. Please take a moment to reflect on these aspects on the slide. Hopefully some of you are viewing this slide with colleagues and others and can discuss this together at the end of the session. The ending letter. I referred to this earlier as I sought to end over 40 clients in a short time. Every emotion in the book and more rose in me here. I need to acknowledge the input of a colleague and friend, Barry Liddell, in my finding my way to this wonderful process, which has made a significant difference to my endings with clients. In brief, prior to the last few sessions I expect to have with the client, where there is a plan for them to move on to another program or care provider, I invite the client to write a letter for the next care provider stating the aspects of themselves that they are considered to be most important for the next person to know. This can include what they hoped for in seeking social work services, how far they've come in meeting their initial hopes, and what is left to be the focus for their next care provision experience. I encourage them to list their strengths as well, stating this is vital for the next person. Some clients pick up on this right away and run with it, but for the most part, it needs to be done in a session or sessions together. Once they feel comfortable with what we have written, I may ask if I can make additions such as greater emphasis on their strengths and occasionally pieces of their past history that could be important to the next care provider. Then one of us types it with both of our names at the bottom, and it's given to the client to take with them in their pocket for the next care provider. If and when they feel that next person is a good fit and they feel safe, they will share the letter. When I am preparing a new care provider, which I sometimes need to do, as I need to know they are available to see the client, I say as little as possible about the client, noting the client is very capable of filling them in on details. If a client doesn't feel the fit is right, they come back to me and we start over to find another person, if possible, that might be a better fit. The letter stayed in the pocket and is ready for the right person when he or she emerges for them. This way, they have control over what information is shared about them and when. I use this also for clients who didn't think they needed a transfer, but were happy to have a backup plan if they needed something further while I was away. Many factors affect the timing and readiness of both the client and the care provider for being able to focus clearly on the ideal ending. Sometimes an ending only becomes clear weeks later when a client no longer calls to book another session. There may be other details requiring your focus towards the end, such that time and space for a more emotionally inclusive ending gets shortchanged. At times I consider endings to be worth revisiting, whether in a phone call, an offer of another, sometimes free session, or a follow-up note to a client. When an ending does not go well, we need to carefully assess whether and when a revisiting of the ending might be ideal and or even possible, because they can have potentially significant benefits for all concerned. Sorry here. There we go. I really find rituals very helpful in endings, and I will read this. The definition that has been given by Walsh and Harringen, any formal activity that endows events with a sense of being special. Rituals symbolize continuity, stability, and the significance of personal bonds while helping people accept changes. The structure of rituals provides a safe framework for practitioners and clients to express their feelings. Rituals can be very simple, such as inviting someone to bring an object that symbolizes their growth or changes during the session, or with family members to select a word or shell to portray their appreciation to other family members at the end of family therapy. My UBC group work students led a part of a class as part of their major class project, and those who chose to take on the final ending session came up with some wonderfully creative ideas for ending their often tightly bonded 12 weeks together. Some of them examples are having each member of the class name a moment that stood out from the rest or a moment that marked a significant shift in their understanding of themselves. These were written and then photographed for each to take with them. Another time, we each contributed phrases summing up our experience as a class, and they worked together to weave those into a poem, which we each took away with us. Those are just a few of the examples. I had a 5-year-old referred because she was collapsing on busy streets while crossing with her school class on trips. Over time, she learned to hold in her imagination her favorite blankie while crossing the street to help her feel safe. She came up with an ending activity on her own. She wanted to bring the infamous blankie to the session, along with 2 of her stuffies, to thank them for helping her have the courage and to let them know she could now cross streets without collapsing. This is one of my best endings ever, for sure. Some clients bring a smooth stone with a word on it, expressing their appreciation, and at times I have similar stones or small objects for clients that symbolize their courage and strength. Rituals need to be intentional, but they can be simple and very transformative ways to end. I use them as often as possible, and clients often have good suggestions for rituals. At this point, I'll look briefly at attachment styles with a view to being more purposeful in factoring these into our unique aspects of ourselves and our clients and our endings. I cannot stress enough how important self-reflection is for us as caregivers. It's important to encourage that in our clients as well. I will not take time to outline Virginia Satir's coping stances, but if you have an opportunity to explore these, they are elegantly simple ways to factor in the respective coping styles of yourself and your clients, and to take steps to acknowledge these individual differences in how you craft your endings. I'm expecting you'll be well acquainted with these relationship patterns. In reading the more recent literature on attachment, I see a collective softening around how deterministic these initial childhood patterns are considered to be. A number of authors caution that these do not explain everything, and that they can be influenced by a number of care providers beyond mothers and fathers, such as grandparents, close friends, babysitters, including our own relationship as care providers. Siegel speaks of some children having more than one attachment relational style from 2 or more differently attached parents. Strong emotional or reactive responses in clients to endings can evoke early memories or experiences in the worker that, though rarely an issue in their everyday lives, can show up in these more intense interpersonal situations. Using the adult attachment tool developed by Mary Ainsworth and colleagues. I'll let you just read that. And stress the important feature is how those parents have come to make sense of their lives that matters most. This research has relevance to ending client relationships in that it brings into sharper focus that our past do not have to determine our present or future, and as care providers, the self-reflection and processing we do of our own earlier life experiences can impact our relationships as well in very positive ways. The metaphor is probably the most fertile power possessed by man. The more I deal with metaphors and use them, the more I agree with this. I just want to talk briefly about Virginia Satir on metaphors. Metaphors operate at different levels at the same time, and they are great ways to engage clients in their own solution and make the therapeutic process more accessible in important ways. Virginia spoke of metaphors as her adjunct therapists, as they did of themselves contribute to the therapeutic process so profoundly, providing distance for clients to see more alternatives to move from the familiar to the less familiar, and to create or suggest or lead to solutions and acceptance of new options. Just want to take a brief moment, we're nearing the end here, for you to consider the metaphor that expresses how you see or envision the helping relationship you have with your client. How we hold and honor the wisdom and strength of our clients directly reflects on our endings. If clients have felt an integral part of the therapeutic process as co-creator with the care provider, rather than just recipient of the process, they will leave their time with you with a fuller sense of being an author of their own solutions and future. Then the ending has a more beginning quality as the clients more fully claim their changes and look ahead to continued growth or problem solving on their own. That, for me, is the essence of the full circle experience in our work, where each is both giver and taker in some respects, and both are touched or changed by the experience of working together. I believe our ability to respectfully acknowledge, in some small way, the impact clients have had on us through their courage, grace, and strength is very important to clients. It's also equally important we can hear and accept their thanks or appreciations of our work when it is expressed. It is not as always as easy as it looks. And now I'll bring this part to a close as I share a quote of Virginia Satir. When she speaks of a harmonious state, she's referring to her sense of being grounded and centered physically, emotionally, and spiritually. She also stressed the importance of looking for and connecting with the life energy of our clients, however faint that might appear in some situations. When I am completely harmonious with myself, it is like one light reaching out to another. At the outset, it is not a question of I will help you. It is simply a question of life reaching out to life. All life talks to life when it is in a harmonious state. If my ego is involved or if I need them to get well, then it is a different story. In this social work week, it feels fitting to honor this amazing social worker's contribution, not only over her lifetime, she died in 1988, but her continuing contribution through those teaching her work throughout Asia, especially Malaysia, China, Malaysia, Singapore, Hong Kong, Thailand, Taiwan, Korea, Turkey, Croatia, Serbia, and even India and parts of Africa. Literally thousands are continuing to be introduced to her work. Thank you. Now your turn.
Thank you, Mary, for broadening our understanding of the impact and the potential of good endings for clients. I'm also impressed that the work of Virginia Satir has become so much worldwide awareness and interest. So it's now time to answer audience questions. I'll do my best to get to all the questions, and I'll try to keep themed questions together to get to as many as possible. However, thank you in advance for your understanding if we don't make it to your question. Okay, the first request is to repeat back some more of the information about the client creating a metaphor. I think you referred to that earlier on.
Okay, so it's really very simple. I just encourage them as we begin, and I sort of mentioned this can be a help to each of us, for them just to think for a moment about their life as a whole, where they are in their life at this moment. So often clients come in with a rehearsed story, and they jump right into it. And I feel this moment to get them to think briefly about the bigger picture of their life creates some distance and perspective, and it already starts them thinking about a solution or an outcome. So not everyone can do it, but it's very simple, and I would say 60% of my clients are able to do that right away. The others aren't, and I don't push it. I make sure they know it's voluntary, and I say that right from the beginning. But I'm always surprised at how spontaneously they will erupt with a picture down the way. And they're often surprised as well. It's not that they're sitting thinking of it, it's that their subconscious comes up with it. And it's a rich moment, and it's very powerful for me. Hope that answers your question.
Okay, here's another question. Often some clients end without notice and explanation. Is it fair to say this is spoken about in the beginning session as to what you will do if there's a sudden end?
No, I don't talk about sudden endings. And I don't use Kramer's suggestion of talking about how we're going to end, because often my sessions are limited. I do a lot of shorter term work, but I mean, I think it's a good idea. The clients, if they're with an employee assistance program, will mention how many sessions do I have. So we are really focused on the ending fairly clearly at the beginning.
Another question is about the ending letter. When a transfer is happening, what are some of the aspects that are outlined to include in the letter?
Well, clients will say, there are a number of transfers that happen because the client has finished their required number of employee assistance program sessions, but they may, through their extended benefits, have an option for another counseling, often with a PhD psychologist, but occasionally with a clinical counselor. Or there may be a reason why the two of us can't continue beyond that point. I'm getting a little off track here. Tell me the question again. Oh, what's included in the letter? So, I'll just say, over time you shared quite a lot for me, and it may be helpful to put that in written form, some of that in written form, so that you don't have to start at the beginning again with another counselor. So that's kind of the context in which we begin the letter. But I also think, I tell them I think it's a really good a review of the sessions to them. I've never heard of anybody who didn't give the letter to someone, and occasionally they give it right at the beginning. But I've had counselors contact me and say how helpful the process was for them. And I think mostly why I value it is the client has control of the information. And when they're going to someone new, I'm sure they wonder what's been said and will be focusing more on their flaws. So this way, it keeps everything above board, and it keeps the focus on their positive abilities as well.
There's been some comments from our audience that they really like the idea of the ending letter.
Oh, great. Well, I really have to credit Gary Lubell. I was really thinking with this process of ending clients, and came and said to her, how do you do it? And I can't remember exactly what she said, but between our conversation and my working on it a bit later, this letter came into view. And it's been very positive.
There's been a few questions about ending with clients who have some very specific challenges. For example, do you have some advice on how you would work on endings with someone with a borderline personality diagnosis, given their difficulty with endings and relationships?
That's about as hard as the questions could possibly get.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I've had few borderline personality clients in my practice. I did, though, when I worked in the emergency department, have them about every other client, it seems, sometimes, or patient. I just think stay very concrete. You know, we may not make the perfect ending, but I get them to be very concrete and really stress owning what they've done that's made a difference. You know, you do your best, and they have many ways of twisting and turning things. I think the important thing is that we don't go into defensiveness with them, because they can be quite critical of us and diminish what they think we have done. I mean, maybe they're not. Maybe they're saying it straight, but it feels sometimes like a diminishment. And so I think we need to stay compassionate and open and just know that what they're saying is what they're saying in that moment, and not necessarily their deepest feeling. And just trust that something has happened out of the time we've had together, and we just need to let go of holding on to what the outcome actually was. They're not likely to give you a lot of praise.
We often have to work with our own feelings.
Yeah, we do. And I think Kramer says this very clearly, how important it is not to be defensive, and also not to try and tell them what we think happened. That this is all, the entire ending is about what they feel is happening. I will occasionally give clients more credit than they give themselves, but I really try not to say, and you did this and you did that, because they're not always ready to fully acknowledge that, and then we take away their control when we add too much.
A related question, what about a client who has a cognitive disability and ending?
Oh boy, and I have had some of those. Let me reach back into my history book here. Again, be very concrete. I often work extra hard to know that they've got somebody they can connect with when they leave my care. This has been the case for some employee assistance clients, but also I had a quite cognitively impaired client who was moving. So I went to extra lengths to know exactly who he could call, to give him numbers and to give him addresses, and to really make it very clear that he wasn't being dumped and that he wasn't going to be left hanging and drying. I also told him that I'd be happy to speak to a family member with the same information I was giving him about the next people for him, so that he had a sense of continuity and that we're all in the same place. And I said, if what I've suggested to you doesn't work, you or your family are welcome to call me, and we'll see what else we can come up with. So I think for cognitively impaired, they have to have it so basic, and I write out everything I can possibly for them. They may not be able to read it, but they've got it in their hands. That's the important piece. I'd love to hear your suggestions on this. I'm sure I can learn a lot from you on it.
When clients end suddenly with no notice, what do you do?
I certainly do lots of reflection. I'd be lying if I didn't do that. And I try to touch in a little bit to where I think they might be. I often feel that they can get into a bit of overload, and I try to watch that when I'm working with them, but I think often that's how patients, or how clients, it's the reason that they tend to end. I have to say these are definitely a small minority of my clients, thankfully, but I think just emotionally and sort of in a kind of visualization, I visualize them feeling good and feeling honored in some way by what we've done. I might just write a little note in a situation like that, hope all's well. If you're needing any further resources, you know you can always call. And but I'm careful about doing that. You just really have to honor where they are. And I can't tell you how many times I've had people come back after a sudden ending, and then they'll explain to you what happened. It doesn't happen often, but it certainly happens in about a third of the times that I've had clients leave suddenly. So we never know what's going on, and it's important that we not make judgments of ourselves in it or them, or to feel like they were running away defensively. I think we need to see them as walking away and having some sense of what they needed at that moment.
There's so many assumptions we can make in those situations, and I hear you.
Multitudes.
And we should really be clear about what our own self-reflection in this area too.
Right. You know, I've mentioned, I don't know how many times in the 30 minutes or 34 that I took, how important supervision is. I just have to underline that. I mean, I have supervision at least 6 times a year, and I have peers or alternates that I can call around what I call the sticky wickets, the places where I feel I'm getting caught or I'm not clear, or something left a taste in my mouth that I haven't completely been able to clear. Maybe a misunderstanding I think's happened. I just try to process that, because otherwise it sticks to it, and it's part of what happens with our next clients.
You mentioned earlier, before we began, that an important word of advice was to know thyself.
Yes, definitely. And I have to say, after 30 years, I see that as a somewhat non-ending process.
The next question is about the coping and attachment styles. And the question is, how do you use the coping and attachment styles to get a perspective of the client in your practice?
Should probably refer back to that page. You know, there are people for whom I don't think about attachment styles much, I have to tell you. I much prefer Virginia Satir's way of looking at it. And she talks about those who have a more blaming style of coping when they're under stress, where the other person is the bad guy and they're fine. And then there are the other ones for whom they are always at fault and the other person is the good guy. Those are really simplistic, but those come out as attachment aspects as well. And or people who are very much in their head and really can't go into feelings easily, or some who just go into absolute denial, just don't want to deal with anything. So I have my coping style that I have to watch out for is that I can go into my head and rationalize things easily. So if I have a client that does that as well, I have to really work a little harder to stay at the feeling level as I'm ending and really draw that piece out. I can't always get them to own it, but I sure better not go there myself. So I think that's a little bit of the dance, and this is a dance. I don't see this as heavy-duty psychoanalyzing. I see it as just noting the broader picture of where our strengths are and where we tend to go under stress and where clients tend to go under stress, and just watching how we're matched or not matched, and that we're not both placating each other or trying to please each other as we're ending. If I have a client who's very much a pleaser, I try to really make sure I give them permission to talk about the things that were hard too. So those are just a few of the examples. I don't stress attachment, and I never use it explicitly with clients. They feel like boxes to me, whereas Virginia's coping stances, they have a little more of a flavor of a dance, and I like that part better.
At this point, I just want to let the audience know that the slides and a recording of the webcast will be on the CASW website, and there will be links in the CASW reporter in April. So you will be able to take a look at the PowerPoints and the references in them again. It's a very rich presentation. We have quite a few more questions too, so I'm going to...
And on the topic of the slides, that was my biggest challenge, was to keep the slides and my what I wanted to say in sync. So I do apologize that we missed a few slides, but you'll have them to refer to in hindsight anyway.
Now here's a question about ending relationships with clients who are terminally ill. Can you say some more about that?
Well, actually, a huge amount of my practice has been in palliative care. Like the last 15 or 20 years, it's been pretty front and center. Because even while I was in private practice, I did casual work in palliative care, often at Christmases and holidays. I often will assess how close I think family members or clients can go to saying what it's like to feel like dying. And often they can't go there, but I will just say, I can't imagine that this is anything but challenging for you, and opening the door and saying anything that you need to share, you're welcome to share. Occasionally, a client will slip into being comatose or into a coma or before we've kind of finished that process. And I really, truly believe that they don't stop being aware when it looks like they are not. And so I'll often have a little conversation by their bedside of my appreciation for what courage they had, and for my belief that they are going to a peaceful place. That's all I would ever say. Occasionally I'd take their hand if they were not cognizant at that moment. But another place that can be really challenging is when the person can no longer relate to those around them. You can have families feeling quite anxious. They feel like they're in the way and they don't know what to do. I actually have a background in therapeutic touch. I probably only have 1 minute here, do I? That's me. Okay. I have a background in therapeutic touch. And so when a client is really agitated as they're dying and the family are uncomfortable, I'll just center myself briefly and just hold their feet for a moment. And it's really amazing how a client will settle when you do that. And then I teach the family to do it. I just say, put all the love that you have in your heart in your hands. Quiet yourself for a moment, take a deep breath, and just allow that love to move through your hands into your client member. And it's incredible how quickly people can do that. And it really makes for a beautiful ending. The other thing with terminally ill patients, which I didn't refer to, and this was an omission, is the work of Joan Halifax. And you can hear more about her on the Upaya website, UPAYA. It's a Zen Buddhist center in California. She has done some beautiful work, or in New Mexico, with using a healing circle with families who are not in sync with each other, who are not at any kind of peace around their ending. And I've used her method with patients, and it's quite powerful. So I would refer you to Joan Halifax, or you can follow up with me and I'll pass along more information. It's been very helpful for endings.
Thanks, Mary. One more question. Say a little more about endings with mandated clients.
I've had very few mandated clients. I'm happy to report. I don't know quite why that's happened, but I don't know that I handle them much differently than ordinary clients. It's still important for me that they own what they have done and that they see how they have gained or grown. And I don't think I can add more on that. They are different, but I tend to treat them as far as endings similarly.
Okay, speaking of endings, it's now the end of our time, so I want to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you for joining us today. And I do apologize, we were unable to get to all the excellent questions given the time constraint. But again, the webinar is recorded and will be on the CASW website. And the PowerPoint slides will be available there as well. A short survey for this webinar will be circulated shortly, and thank you in advance for providing your feedback. It's very important to us. And I also want to take this opportunity to thank Mary for lending her time and experience to present ending client relationships to us today. And to you, all the best and enjoy the remaining days of National Social Work Month. Thank you.
This concludes today's webcast. You may now disconnect. You may begin your webcast.
Good afternoon. My name is Diane Heath, and I'm the Executive Director of the British Columbia Association of Social Workers. I have the honor of welcoming you all to today's webcast that's a collaboration between BC ASW and the Canadian Association of Social Workers in celebration of National Social Work Month. For today's webcast, we have over 400